welcome back everybody to the ATB NFL live show. Unfortunately, we're a week late on talking about the draft and other things. Had some stuff happen. I won't name any names, but
Sorry.
yes, yeah, it wasn't
Yeah, it was
Tony's
me. It
fault.
was me.
No, it wasn't Tony's fault. He had some throat issues going on, but we're all good today now though, so we'll be able to jump into things, talk about our favorite classes, least favorite classes, most confusing classes, all that good stuff that everybody does. But just to get started, before we jump into the draft stuff, there's a bit of news we missed just based on timing, unfortunately, from when we did the show last. Lamar Jackson is a Baltimore Raven long term on a new 5-year contract, getting pretty much, for the most part, everything that he probably wanted out of the deal for the most part. So much speculation throughout the offseason. Was he going to get traded? Was the team going to offer him on that the tag that he was put on? And finally, it gets done right before the drafts to allow the Ravens to kind of do whatever it is they want to do. So I know as a Steelers fan, before I send it over to you guys, I'm not particularly thrilled about this because I kind of wanted to see the Ravens have to figure out quarterback. But at the same time, I'm happy for Lamar. This is a contract that I think he deserved, and I'm glad that he got it after Hurts got his. So I'm going to send it over to Tony first. What do you think about his deal? Do you think it was the right move for both sides here? And what do you expect them to gain from this? Or what do you expect them to do this year especially?
Yeah, I'm thrilled. This is what I've been kind of begging both sides to do for the entire time. And I don't know. We don't know what the Ravens had offered previously. We've heard like tidbits, but
Yeah.
from my perspective, it always seemed like they were willing to give a quarterback deal that, like, every time a great quarterback comes up for a deal, we kind of know what their structure is going to be. It was before when we heard Lamar agreed to a deal and we didn't know the structure. I said it's Jalen Hurts times 105%. It's just going to be the same structure, increase the value a little bit, and that's exactly what happened. It makes sense. Elite quarterbacks get paid these contracts. Lamar, don't worry about the guaranteed money. You're going to make every dime of that contract and more. The Ravens got to feel so relieved. If they were playing hardball, they finally gave in and did the right thing, and good for them for recognizing that. So overall, I think it just makes a ton of sense. I'm glad we finally have resolution. Shout out to Nicole Lynn. I feel like she's not getting a cut from this deal, but man, she really did all of the work for Lamar here. So mega agent there, and she nailed the Jalen Hurts deal. Going into this year, so back in the ATB chat when they hired Todd Monken, before I thought there was any chance Lamar was leaving, I said, oh, congrats on the MVP, Lamar. They're going to be back in first place. And I still think they have really high expectations now. Like, they're not being considered one of these like Super Bowl contending teams in the AFC. They should be. The defense is still really strong. They've added good players. And then the offense with Lamar in place, the best group of weapons he's had in the NFL. I think incredible things are going to come. And most importantly, Todd Monken is going to get him out in space. He's got a vertical passing offense. We saw Jameis Winston throw for like 5,000 yards in this offense before. So I think we're going to see a really fun new era of Lamar Jackson and a side of him that we haven't been able to see just because of the coaching staff.
Yeah, I know for me, I'm not super excited. Greg Roman has kind of been my best friend for the past few years because he's limited their offense in terms of what they're willing to try to do. And I'm going to jump to Zach here in a second and get his thoughts, but I just want to make that comment about Todd Monken being the offensive coordinator there. I think the thing that people misconstrue with Lamar is the fact that, like especially last year, he was one of the worst deep passers statistically in NFL last year when he played. The amount of just the lack of rhythm in that offense in the passing game, quarterbacks, especially ones that aren't as naturally accurate, because Lamar has had to work on his accuracy throughout his time in the NFL. He's become an accurate quarterback, but he's not as accurate as maybe some of the elite accuracy throwers, right? He needs a rhythm. He needs to know, okay, this is what I'm going to expect from the defense. I need to have receivers running the right routes and all this stuff, because he's not going to be able to on the fly adjust like some other of the elite quarterbacks, like an Aaron Rodgers type or somebody like that just has that natural stroke to them that they can just get the ball wherever it needs to be at any time. He does need a little bit more structure in the passing game, and he hasn't had it. Like when he has had it, when there's been games where the receivers get open and they call a lot of pass plays, he's gotten into a rhythm. I mean, I think of the Colts game a few years ago when he basically just single-handedly threw them into a win after they were down. Like, that's the type of stuff that maybe they can expect more of him this year. And if he can get into a rhythm as a passer, his legs are going to become just that much more of a threat, because if you can't sell out against him, if you can't sell out against the run game, it's going to become a problem, especially with the speed they have at the receiver now. And we'll talk about, maybe talk about the draft a little bit later. We'll see what you guys have to say with theirs. But Zach, what do you think about this move?
Yeah, the Ravens just need to call up Jalen Hurts and say thank you very much, because they, as we've all been saying for the past few weeks, Baltimore was just banking on the fact that no other team was dumb enough to do what Cleveland did last year, and literally Jalen Hurts just went to the Super Bowl, had a massive turnaround, and that gave the Ravens all they had to do to look at Lamar and be like, hey, look, we get it, man. But this dude just took what way less than what you're saying, what that dude over in Cleveland had. So yeah, I mean, stabilizing the market a bit. Not that they don't deserve the money, because they definitely do. It's and not necessarily like arguing about the numbers part, but the guaranteed part, absolutely, because of just the undetermining nature of this sport. But yeah, I'm glad that he's staying in Baltimore just because it makes things a bit more fun. And like as far as the NFL as a whole, like I live in Virginia. It makes at least there's something exciting to possibly go to in like my general vicinity.
There you go. But yeah, I do want to mention Hurst before we move on to that contract really is what I think, and you mentioned it kind of, Tony, that broke the camel's back because the Ravens, I think, were willing to kind of play hardball this whole time because no one else had gotten that new contract yet, right? At least one that they cared about because, again, they weren't looking at Watson as a precedent, which, again, I think is smart for the league and for them. But then when Hurst deal dropped and it was kind of in line with what we expected the next quarterback contract looked like, they're like, all right, Lamar, what if we just basically give you that with throw a couple dollars back in there too? Like that's what it took, and I think that is ultimately good for them because they knew, okay, now that this deal is up, we got to get ahead of everyone else because what if randomly the Bengals will say, you know what, we got plenty of cash flow right now, we just got that new stadium deal. Hey Joe, you want to just get this thing hammered out right now? Like if they would have done that, that really ups the ante then a little bit. So I think it was smart for them to do it when they did. And also I'm glad that Hurts got his deal for obvious reasons, and then it did lead to Lamar. So I'm happy for all sides there for sure.
Why does Joe Burrow have to be in Cincinnati?
Because they were bad.
I know, but it's just, man, I can't wait to see how long that deal takes.
It's going to be I mean, this is a team that does not traditionally do deals like they're going to have to do, right? And I think that
they don't have the cash.
Yeah, well, there's a reason they did stadium naming rights for the first time ever. Well, there's a reason why they did that.
Got that cash flow.
Hey, Jamar's going to get like a mini quarterback deal too when his time is up. So
I think
same with T. Higgins. Like
I don't.
They got guys to play.
I wonder if he's the odd man out, honestly.
But that's the thing. But I don't think people understand when people talk about how absurd the Deshaun Watson thing was. The Browns owner had to write a check in full for that entire contract and put it in on the records.
He didn't. So the escrow thing is weird. So like it's actually technically like Lamar's deal, like all the guarantee money that he has that's fully.
Yeah.
They don't have to put it in escrow until like 2024 later.
Yeah, it's the roster bonus thing. It basically at the beginning of every season, there's like a $48 million option they can choose to take in a lump sum, or they can spread out over void years and shit.
It's weird, but
it's silly.
It's
gymnastics.
Like if you want to know like the fully like that stuff, there's actually a really good video by Brett Coleman. I'm sure you guys are familiar with him. He broke down how that whole escrow fully guaranteed contract thing works. If you check that, that'll explain it better than I can. But basically, the timeline is not like I signed the deal, I got to have $200 million in the bank.
But you do have to have like a good portion.
You should have it because you don't want to not have it in a year.
Yeah.
But in general,
there is some percentage that you do have to have.
There's definitely
the initial signing bonus.
And that's where
there's time for a lot of it. Yeah.
Some of these NFL franchises, for how big that these contracts are getting, they're not gonna.
Not every team is capable of doing it all the time, for sure.
Yeah.
So we'll see what I still think. By the way, this is a little bit of a tangent before we jump in, but I still think the future of like top of the line quarterback contracts is going to be like a 3 to 4 year fully guaranteed structure for some of these guys, just to make sure that they get that three full guaranteed years, and then they can kind of take a year. But they're basically the Kirk Cousins route, but on a heightened scale. Like I think that's ultimately what some teams are going to do, especially teams that don't have. Maybe they have 150 million, but they don't have 250 million to do. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like that's kind of what I think it might be. But curious to see what those deals look like. I'm sure we'll talk about them when they maybe drop. We'll see, when that'll be for like guys like Herbert and Burrow. But moving forward, let's get into our favorite draft classes. We're going to start with favorite ones. Start off on a positive note. Let's go to Zach. Actually, I want to start with you. What's your first favorite class? And we'll let you do all yours, and then we'll talk about them, and then we'll move on. So,
all right. So I would say my first favorite one is New Orleans.
okay,
I think the Saints did a fantastic job right away addressing the very, very big areas of need, and the fact that, look, their defensive line was just completely picked apart, and they got Brian Brzee and Isaiah Foskey in the 30th pick of round 1, and then the 9th pick of round 2, and then who knows what's going to happen with Alvin Kamara this year. So then they were like, okay, well, why don't we go ahead and get Kendra Miller too in round 3? And they hitting a lot of necessary holes. I also really like the pick of Jake Haener, because I think he probably brings something to the backup room that's much more positive than anybody has seen over the past few years.
That Fresno State connection.
yeah.
Oh yeah, I think he's going to end up there. There's a lot of stuff out there about him being that guy that's like, oh, he might not start, but you're going to hear his name for like 10, 12 years as a backup down the road. Like he totally gets his role. And
that's his profile. Yeah.
Yeah. Then that's where I'm like, that's kind of what New Orleans needs, is not necessarily somebody who they're like, oh, this is the next person, because they didn't have the pick for that. But it's, oh, if things go sour, this guy can step in and we'll be fine. Because, that's the New Orleans way. I think I'm absolutely stealing one from you here, Shayne. And because number 2 for me is Pittsburgh.
On all of our lists, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah, because there could not have been a more perfect first 3-4 picks for Pittsburgh. I don't know much about the 4th round and the 2 7th round picks.
I'll talk to you when we get there.
Oh, yeah. But I mean, to get Broderick Jones with pick 14, and then to have Joey Porter Jr. stay on the board until the first pick. And man, I will not lie, that Keanu Benton pick was dirty. I was with my girlfriend getting ready to walk into BJ's, and I was like, oh, we're getting ready to pick. Oh, the Dolphins could get Keanu Benton. And then like literally 2 picks before, I was. Yeah. And then Darnell Washington as well. Solid draft. And then my last one is a little interesting. It's actually Cleveland. Because I think Cedric Tillman is going to fill a very, very, very immediate void for them. But then they also got DeJuan Jones in the 4th round. I mean, look, I know, yeah, but for somebody who was talked about like very, very, very high with the value of like day 2 or day 1, like that's some really good value. I mean, that he will probably add something immediately.
It's a strong card throw.
Yeah. I also like their flyer on Dorian Thompson-Robinson, because if Watson, I think
QB5 for me, QB5. So
yeah. So yeah, New Orleans, Pittsburgh, and Cleveland are my top 3 that I have. I didn't want to go bored. I spice it up a little bit.
So I'll start with the Saints. I want to talk a little bit about the Saints here. So I really like the Brzee pick a lot. One of my favorite first round picks, because one, I just wanted to see this guy go in the first round. I think he deserves it. His story is great, tragic but great, and I think he's a super talented player. I mean, he was the top recruit in the country for a reason. I think he showed flashes of that. And I think the Saints make a lot of sense for him. I think he could fill a couple hats for them. Foskey was about a round too early for me personally, so that was one issue I had with it. And then Kendra Miller is about 2 rounds too early for me. I thought there's a lot of better running backs on the board at that point in the draft, and that doesn't mean that he won't be good for them, because again, this running back class is really good and he was very productive. But I don't see him as a full-time starter in the NFL, so they're looking to eventually move on from Kamara. He might be able to fill some of that role early on, especially if he's injured or not injured, but if he's suspended or whatever it will be. But Just again, a little too early for me. And then the rest of the draft, though, I have no problem with. Like Salvadori at the start of the fourth round, like he's a good dart throw at this point in the draft.
Yeah, that was my
Offensive
favorite
line.
pick of theirs.
Yeah, really, really good. Pick up for them there at the top of the fourth. Jay Kaner, really probably my favorite backup profile in the class. Is just pure, just like he will get the job done for you when you need him to, but he probably won't do much more. Totally fine in the fourth round, especially because the run on quarterbacks at that point was starting to happen. Like you had to kind of get your guy if you wanted him. Jordan Howden, safety out of Minnesota. I watched him a lot as a Big Ten guy with Wisconsin for me. He's the guy that I think he honestly like he has this weird situation where he's so conservative that like it's a problem. Like he actually needs to get a little bit more aggressive, I think, but I think he has starter traits, honestly. So that could be interesting for them. And then AT Perry all the way down to round 6. Like that's really, really, really good value for a receiver that could end up being a receiver 2 for them at some point this year, depending on how Thomas plays and whatever happens there. So
depending on their injury luck after last year.
Yeah, that's the other problem too. Before we talk about the other classes, what do you think, Tony, on Saints one?
On the Saints, yeah, it was firmly in my list of like I don't have much to say about it on this show. Like it's not something I loved. It's not something I strongly disliked.
Right,
it was just kind of like, hey, I mean, you got some players that are gonna help out. And on the Kendra Miller front, I do worry that he's a bit redundant to Jamal Williams, but ultimately like adding a third round back to the team makes sense. So
considering their
no complaints there.
Yeah,
Nick Saldiveri, I do really love. They had to trade up to get him, but getting him at the top of the fourth, I really like that value.
I don't see them moving on from Kamara. I looked at them with Miller, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we just don't know how many games he's playing this year."
That's a big part of it. Sense. Yeah, they're going to ask him to fill that, and then we'll save the Steelers for later because we'll talk more about them. I'm sure.
Yeah,
but
I did a piece on Saquon last week, and the running back contract room is extremely interesting.
Yeah, it's like you've either paid a guy like 3 years ago who's still reaping the benefits, or you got smart this offseason and aren't paying anybody, or they're on a franchise tag. Like there's like 5 guys on a franchise tag, and those are 5 of the 7 over 10 million.
And there's really only two running backs who are like the top 2 are McCaffrey and Kamara, and honestly, they're worth their value. Like
when they're healthy.
McCaffrey is. I have questions about Kamara at this point in his career.
I don't think that's Kamara's fault. I think that's New Orleans not knowing how to run their offense because it's disgusting.
I wouldn't drop him into any roster at that price tag, but that's just
not that price tag. Yeah,
that's the price tag issue for me, not the player.
Yeah. And then I do want to touch on the Browns a little bit, just in case we don't see them again anymore.
I wanted to talk about them too.
Yeah, so Cedric Tillman was gigantic value for me. I had him as like a. I could have been talked into him at 31 to the Chiefs. Like that's where I could have been talked into it. So that tells you what you need to know there. Getting him at 74. Siaki Ika, I think that he'll be fine as a rotational run defender, but that's pretty much it. I don't know if you get anything more out of him. Top 100 pick is a little bit iffy for me, but again, they need it. So DeJuan Jones, good dart throw at this point, considering his process. I as much as I'm a fan of his game on film, I understand the concerns with his weight and everything else. So he's definitely like, if he doesn't work out, it's a 4th round pick. Great. If he works out, though, I think he is a legit starting right tackle in the NFL. So it's a good dart throw at that point. McGuire out of Missouri, whatever. DTR, he's my QB5, so I can't complain about it. Now, unfortunately, he goes to a team that, unless Watts were to get hurt, he has no chance of playing, unfortunately, which makes me upset. But I can't say the value wasn't good because I would have taken him in the late, probably mid-second round, honestly. And then Cameron Mitchell, Northwestern cornerback, best friends with apparently Greg Newsome, so good for them. He gets those 2 guys together. I think he's a good player, too. Luke Whippler all the way down 6, and I want to talk about this one because this was a guy that was mocked very high, and I feel like obviously it was more of an injury situation apparently.
Yeah, it had to be medicals.
Down the board. But if he can get healthy, I mean, they had Pat Elflein, I think it is who played well for them last year, if I'm not mistaken. Finally, is that who their center is? Right. I think. Yeah. He had a rough career until last year, but if he regresses or if Nick Harris, their other center, isn't healthy, like they have a guy that hopefully can be that starting center long term. So really like their class. So I know you want to talk about it too, Tony. So
yeah, I think they did a really great job, despite not having high picks, of just like taking the value where it was, and it just happened to align with positions that like are really smart to add. So Cedric Tillman, that you could have drafted him 40 picks earlier and it would have been a value. Siaki Siaka, Ika, whatever
Yeah,
however you say
Siaka
it.
Ika, yeah.
I'm not particularly a fan, but I do think Cleveland's defense last year was hilarious to watch because they could just be run on by anybody.
Yes.
Like you could have the worst
Yeah.
running game in the league and just there's gaps.
So I
There's
get
gaps
it. Yeah, I
everywhere.
get that.
So he's just a
Yeah.
very large man that sucks as an athlete that can do one thing pretty well, and that is plug the run. And so that's that matters there. And then Isaiah McGuire, I'm a huge fan of. I skipped over Jawan Jones because y'all know my feelings there. In the 4th round, no complaints, but I probably still would have preferred a different developmental tackle at pick 111. But Isaiah McGuire, I loved. DTR, I love. And I know, Shayne, you're upset that he's not going to a place with like a starting role within grass. There's very few of those places out there. So as far as like landing spots, nobody thought Jalen Hurts was landing in a spot where he had a path to starting when Carson Wentz, who had just signed a mega deal, was there. Shit happens, and I think it's a good offense.
Yeah.
Good
The fit is there
place
for
him.
sure.
I wonder.
Fit
I wonder how long Watson's leash is, and if he's not able to get any better. If
Unfortunately, I bet it's pretty long.
Well, it's probably pretty long. But I mean, if they look like they did the end of last season for like a good 9, 10, 11 weeks, I wouldn't be surprised if they're like, let's see what the rookie has. Like,
especially if DTR is like playing well in practice.
If it's a loss, especially if it's a lost season, honestly. But we'll see.
Yeah. And then I knew nothing about Cameron Mitchell, so can't really comment there. I guess, dipping back into Northwestern well, Shayne, like you said.
Sure.
And then, Luke Whippler, pick 190. Clearly, medicals made him fall. That's something where, just take him at that point. Like, the Chiefs got a gift in Trey Smith in the 6th round because of the same thing. So, you never know. Maybe it works out. It doesn't hurt that you have the best offense or one of the best offensive line coaches out there. So, I thought it was a good draft. I'm glad it got mentioned. It was on my extremely long list of teams that I could include in the drafts I liked. So, glad they got some love.
Yeah. So let's jump to you, Tony. What's your 3 favorite draft classes?
All right, so one of them was the Steelers, and I don't want to talk too much about them.
I'll make sure I cover them.
So I'll jump down the board. This is why I listed out a ton. So my number 2 that I'm calling my number 1 because I'm not mentioning the Steelers is the Arizona Cardinals. Thought it was an incredible draft, the foundational draft for their new GM. Got to tell the whole story. They traded down from 3rd overall and got the most important thing that happened in the draft this year was the Arizona Cardinals getting the Houston Texans 1st round pick next year. That is the single most important thing that happened in the NFL on draft night.
I would like to talk about that later.
Yeah, trust me, it's coming up in my The inverse is on my board on the other side too.
Okay.
But so getting that just automatically puts them in the massive winners bucket because of what that's going to mean in the future. But then they navigate the board, get back up, and get their top tackle, somebody they were going to take at 3rd overall in Paris Johnson. So you've got your foundational left tackle. B.J. Ojulari, I love in the 2nd round. Garrett Williams, great value. Michael Wilson, great value. John Gaines, great. They just down the entire board took players that are going to be able to play on that team and help. They dipped into the defense a lot. They dipped into the offense a lot. Keitrell Clark, their 6th round pick. Shayne, I know he's a favorite of yours. So just adding good players across a bunch of different picks and picking up insane future value. This is what you should do in your first draft as a GM taking over a franchise that hasn't known what they were doing in years. Like, there's a lot of overturn that needs to happen. Great foundational step. So that was my number 1. Eagles are the next team. I know this is everybody's favorite. I just wrote good players, perfect value, no notes. They just know how to navigate the board. They just understand that, like, hey, take the consensus good players at high value positions and good things will happen to you. They took Tyler Steen was my guy on the interior O-line. Sidney Brown we gave a lot of love to at safety. Yep. Keely Ringo I'm not a fan of, but that athlete at that value, just up and down the board, value, good players at important positions, so they deserve the love they're getting. And then my 3rd one is a really interesting one, the Rams. And
okay.
So everybody jokes like how they never have any draft picks. They entered the draft.
Dude. F them picks.
Well, they entered the draft with a ton of picks. I think they made 11 or 12. Oh no, they made 14 draft picks.
Yes.
They added 14 players, and they also added like 20 undrafted free agents, which is just funny.
They have so much roster turnover they have to deal with.
Oh, they drafted Stetson Bennett.
They
Yes.
did.
So that I don't like that, but the rest of it. So what they are just fully understanding where they are with this draft, and I love that. Like I love to see self-awareness from a team and good process, and I think they did that. You add a ton of draftable players to your roster who you know are just going to get playing time, and you're going to figure out who the diamonds in the rough are. So not to mention like Steve Avila, if you're picking 36, you can't be picking Tutu Atwell like they have in the past. You got to be picking guys who are going to play. And Steve Avila, stud on the interior offensive line. Byron Young, at worst, he's a high upside rotational pass rusher. I think he's got more in his bag just because he's of the athlete he is. Kobe Turner, undersized, athletic freak defensive tackle with a ton of production. Who does that sound like? I don't know. Somebody else on the team, maybe? Stetson Bennett. We're going to skip over that because that's just funny. Nick Hampton, great player.
Baby.
Warren McClendon, great player. Davis Allen, he's going to play. Puka Nacua might be a huge steal. Trey Tomlinson from TCU, like he shouldn't be going in the 6th round. I know he's small, but he's feisty. He's good. They just got guys who are going to play, and they got good players, and they got a ton of them. I think who they are, where they are in their process, that was a great draft for them. So those are my three.
I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
How many Georgia players were drafted?
A lot. I mean,
a ton.
I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't know
It
the actual
seems like
number.
every single class that I look at, it's like.
I mean,
at
Eagles
least
drafted 7 of them. I'm pretty sure. I know it's only actually like 3, but it feels
even
like
the
7.
Rams. They got 2 on here right here.
Yeah. Well, for real quick, I'll talk about the Rams class a little bit before we move to my stuff, and I'll let Zach talk about some of it too. Like, first of all, Eagles was a pick of mine, so I'll change that up. Cardinals was a pick of mine, I'll change that up.
Sorry,
Tony and I were on the same page. I mean, you're right. I can't say anything, but I have some backups too. But like Cardinals, I'll just briefly say like they knocked out of the park in every way possible. They played for the future. They played for the now. They did everything right. I have a lot of hope for this franchise for the first time since my boy Kurt Warner was playing quarterback for them. So that's really good. Obviously, Philly, they can't keep getting away with this. Okay,
Yes.
we gotta like someone has to step in and be like, I'm gonna take a guy. You know, I don't know if I love this player, but I'm gonna take him just so Howie can't have it. All right. It's getting ridiculous. Nolan Smith goes at pick 30 for some reason. I understand that he's not fully developed as a pass rusher. You let him go to the one team that has him already on the roster. Like, why are we thinking this is a good idea to let him go there? Like, it's basically, Hassan Reddick goes if he gets hurt or moves on, something happens. Oh, we just got Hassan Reddick back in the the back lot here. We'll just pick him up and get him out. Like, what do we do? Why are we doing this to ourselves? Like, what's going on? So that upset me, honestly. I'm like, we can't. This couldn't happen, right? Because I would just see the Nolan Smith knock on the board. Pick 28. It's like, oh, so he hasn't been picked yet. Oh, okay. Well, I think we know who the pick is at pick 30. And then, like, even Keely Ringo, a guy that I'm not a huge fan of at corner, I think he could play safety, hopefully, for them, or corner, whichever one. But in the 4th round, who cares what he plays? He's just a 4th-round pick. He doesn't have to be a 2nd-round pick, even. So it's like, it's stupid. Like, that's all I have to say about them. The Rams, though, I want to talk about a little bit. I really like what they did, too, Tony, because they just took a bunch of players, none of whom I think are, like, truly, even Stetson Bennett to a certain degree, are, like, guys who aren't going to make the roster necessarily guaranteed. Like, all these guys have roster potential because of where they're at as a team, and they took players to fill out roles that they don't have right now, realistically, right? I do have a question, though, for both of you before I let Zach kind of chime in on whatever he wants to chime in here. Over-under on starts by Stetson Bennett in his rookie season, considering Stafford is probably going to die at some point.
Who?
I feel like Vegas would set it at, I don't know. Like, I would go. I feel like I'd go under no matter what. But what would Vegas set the line at? Probably like 2.5.
I would set it personally, like based on my own like opinion on what's going to happen here. Is like I would set it at like 6, legitimately.
Yeah, because you guys know who the backup is.
Yeah.
Do you guys know who the backup
or something?
LA is.
I forget who it is right now. Is it
Brett Rippin?
Yeah, he's got some starting experience.
Yeah. I just feel like there's something about them taking him in the 4th round that screams like we're gonna play this kid if Stafford gets hurt. That's what my thing is. Is like, and that's why like the problem is Stafford probably is going to miss time. So at some point he's gonna get thrown out there. His 26-year-old self, or however old he is, he's gonna get thrown out there.
I'm gonna say
it's gonna be fun no matter what happens. Pretty much.
I'm gonna say
it's either gonna be hilarious or like somehow good. I don't know. But
if the number is 6, I'm gonna say under.
I'll still take the under, but like I think that like it's fair to ask that question because I think there's a reason he was taken where he was.
Oh, well, I'm going to say the under only because I think if he has to make a start, oh man,
He might just be bad enough.
This
to
ain't
just not
college
be,
anymore,
yeah.
Stetson. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, if he gets blown up in his first start, he might just not start anymore. They might just throw whoever out, like Rippon or whoever else. But like, I think there's a very high probability he starts a game this year for that.
The
But yeah, go ahead,
fourth
Zach.
string quarterback is Dresser Win.
Yeah, sure, we'll go with that. Is the
That's a
Spurgeon
real
win?
name.
Spurgeon win, son, maybe? Nah, let's not do that. Anyway, Zach, do you have anything you want to say about the game? Or about
Yeah,
the
no.
Rams?
So it's funny because like everybody talks about all of the Georgia players that Philly got, and then we are also ignoring the fact they also got Tyler Steen,
Yeah, really good
and
interior
Sidney
player.
Brown.
Yeah, my number one safety if you don't consider Branch a true safety.
And that's like my thing when everybody's like, "Oh, Keely Ringo could just move over to safety." It's like, y'all realize they drafted a safety 1 round earlier.
Yeah, but I still think his best position is there. But he doesn't have to
yeah.
do that. I mean, in the 4th round, you can try to develop him a corner. I don't care. Like,
They just are building an absolutely ridiculous juggernaut. And I mean, like, can somebody please go to the Philadelphia front office and slide those Madden sliders up a bit to
yeah,
make
like
this a bit? This
don't
isn't
know.
fair. This isn't
It pays dividends to have good process because they're at the point where they're drafting 2 years ahead of their needs
Yes.
and not having to take care of any current holes. So
Yeah.
they just they can continue to do this until they start missing in massive quantities, which like I don't know when they're going to do that because Howie just hasn't in his career. He misses, but he can just continue ripping and he'll get hits.
He'll find it eventually. Yeah.
It's impressive. They're drafting 2 years ahead of what they need, and it's beautiful.
Yeah, the you guys both said, the Rams draft pretty interesting, just with what everything is and where they sit as a franchise at the moment. Like again, we joke about screw them picks, but they made 14.
Yeah.
So
they grabbed all the darts at the
Yeah.
dartboard, just threw them all at the same time. So we'll figure something out. Yeah.
There's another team that I will reference in the next, not as a team whose draft I disliked, but Tony, they did it. The Patriots made all those picks.
They did, and they actually traded back. They added picks.
They got it.
Kudos to you, Bill Belichick. Kudos to you.
Yeah.
We'll see how many of them make the roster, but they added like 15
see.
players. So
yeah, we'll see what happens there. So I'll jump in. I'm going to start with, since we didn't talk about it as much because you guys were gracious enough to let me kind of have the floor here. The Steelers. I still am trying to figure out what exactly how they pulled this off for the most part. Because like you could look at the Eagles and be like, oh, they got Jalen Carter at 9 and Nolan Smith fell away to 30, and like they did a great job. For them to jump to 14 at the right time to get Broderick Jones ahead of the Jets, right? Which you're welcome, guys, by the way. And then, granted, the Patriots get Christian Gonzalez, but they could have just taken him there anyway, so it doesn't matter. But for then Joey Porter Jr. to fall out of the first round with his trades, hilarious. Now, granted, I get he's not a perfect scheme fit for some teams because he doesn't have some of the zone feel, some of that stuff. Like I get that. But for us, especially for the Steelers, like he is the premier corner for us specifically, outside of like obviously the obvious guys. You get him at pick 32, essentially again for the thanks Bears, by the way. And then Keanu Benton, you already talked about Zach. Not only is one of my favorite players in the draft class, and I'm a Wisconsin guy, you know this, but just a perfect fit for what they need in the interior. Now that again, Cam's getting older, Ogunjobi's back on a deal, but probably only for the next year or two. Need more depth there. And then Darnell Washington falls to pick 93 because of, I guess, like some knee questions possibly. And like my whole thing with it is, and we talked about this, Tony, like I don't know how high his upside is as a receiver, but I also don't care because he plays for my team. And guess who they have? Pat Freiermuth is a receiving tight end for us. He could catch 20 balls a year. And if he can perform as a blocker that in the way that I think he will be able to in the NFL long term, I don't care if he plays 6 years because of his knees. As a third round pick, he will return value, right? Like the team is clearly just loading up to be like, we're going to run the ball 40 times. And in the fourth quarter, when we have a slim lead, we're going to let Kenny cook. That's what the plan is. It's just a better version of what they did last year where he had to do that anyway. But now we actually might be able to run the ball effectively most of the time. Then you get Nick Herbig at pick 132. This is the one that I'm a little bit confused about because even if you like view him as a guy you have to rotate back as a true linebacker instead of an edge, which I don't believe anyway, he's worth a third round pick with his traits just as an athlete. and you get him at 132. We are desperately in need of a third edge, right? He can immediately do that. I don't think he necessarily has like starting upside as an edge, like a full-time edge rusher, but I don't care because he's a fourth-round pick. It doesn't matter. He can be the third edge, and then we can figure out if we have to pay Highsmith or don't pay him, whatever. It gives us somebody who can actually rush the passer, has a pass rush skill set out the box that we don't have on the roster outside of our starters. Corey Trice in the 7th round, if he's healthy, he will start games for this team. I guarantee, like, there's almost 100% chance he will start a game for this team this year if he's healthy, because our corner room outside of now Joey Porter Jr. And granted, Levi Wallace, don't put too much shade on Levi. Tony, I don't know what you're.
He is exactly what he is.
He is what he is, right?
You don't necessarily want that starting if you've got better options.
Yeah. So again, Corey Trice, he was my 10th corner, and I had him as a 3rd round pick. Like, huge value if he can stay healthy. I understand that's kind of the big issue, but we'll see. And then Spencer Anderson, he's a depth offensive lineman at best. Kind of plays all positions. Completely destroyed the draft. Cannot be happy. Like, they took 4 of my favorite players in this class, and they also just threw in Nick Herbig just to make me feel better about it. Like, literally, that's what they accomplished. So I can't say anything more than that. So I won't spend too much more time on them. But next class I want to talk about, and this is one that I kind of just, I'm glad that they didn't, at least in my opinion, screw this up. The Indianapolis Colts. They stick and they get Anthony Richardson at 4. Perfect quarterback for what Steichen is going to want to do in the NFL as a head coach and what he's done as an offensive coordinator already. Love that fit for him. I think that he's going to have a chance to play early because of the scheme that he's going to be in. I think that if Minshew is just not able to beat him out or like keep him away, then that's okay, because I think they can make him viable as a rookie, even if he isn't all the way there as a passer quite yet. So that's really good for him. Julius Brents in the 2nd round, really good value at this point. Again, a lot of people had him sneaking in the 1st. I think this is a little bit better, spot for him. Really good scheme fit in the cover 3 scheme with Gus Bradley. Josh Downs at pick 79.
Yeah.
What are we doing? Like, why are we letting guys that are, like, I understand he's undersized, right? But Jordan Addison went in the 1st round, and I think those two are comparable players in my opinion. They are. Like, maybe you give the edge to Addison a little bit, but like Downs, man, like, you get him at pick 79, really rounds out the receiving core really nicely. Blake Freeland, his tape is iffy, but he is one of the best athletes that we've seen come out as a tackle. So good dart throw for a team that could use some developmental tackles. Why is Adebawore going in the freaking 4th round?
Yeah, I don't know if that was medicals or like the fact
I haven't heard anything medically, right?
Everything about him was like just this pure projection, and maybe the NFL wasn't excited about that as we thought they would be. Like I don't understand a world where Kalijah Cansey goes 19th overall and Adebawore goes in the 4th round.
It is better, right?
It is better, but
again, like, Adebawore tested even better than him, and not only even better, but like significantly better, actually,
and had
longer.
Most
arms.
Importantly, NFL length. Yeah, like exactly. the longer arms, they matter.
And I haven't heard any medical things, so unless we don't know what's going on, like, I don't understand how he was drafted there, especially under multiple other interior players and edge players. And he's a perfect fit for what they want to do, and it's like absolutely perfect. Darius Rush in the 5th round also.
Yeah, that was a good one.
I don't know
there were a couple drafts where like somebody, like a team double dipped at a position and the second guy they drafted might just outright be better. Like, I think he might be outright better than Julius Brents. I wish I had mentioned this 5 minutes ago when we were talking about it, but I think Corey Trice day 1 is a better cornerback than Joey Porter Jr. in Pittsburgh. Like, I think there's a couple teams who did this, and the Bills did it last year with Christian Benford and Kyer Elam, and we saw. Now they took a position of weakness to a position of strength because they took 2 dart throws and one at the high end athlete in the early, and then one on the better current player later. So it was I love when teams do that.
Yeah, I understand that. So Daniel Scott, round 5, really good value for a guy with his traits. I mean, he has starting traits. He just needs to learn how to tackle. Dude cannot tackle, but whatever. Will Mallory, whatever, tight end, like, he got some buzz early, but nothing really there. Evan Hall out of Northwestern, fun player. Honestly,
I love Evan Hall.
Very fun player. I can see him factoring into the rotation there. Don't know much about Titus Leo. Jalen Jones is another guy. I could see him starting for this team at some point, like getting 7th round. Like, I know he doesn't have the athletic traits, but like, dude,
I figured he was like a mid-round guy. So yeah, I think that's football. Yeah,
for sure. So, and then Jake Witt, weird situation with him. He was, I believe, a tight end until last year.
Was he the workout guy from like Northern Michigan or something?
Yes.
Okay.
And he played like he walked on, I think, after playing, I did think a different sport maybe or something like that. at Northern Michigan, and then played tight end, and then only played tackle about a year and a half in college, and was second team all conference in their conference and gets drafted. Like, what a cool story. Don't know if he'll do anything, but
Take a
I'll
swing.
take,
Why
hey,
not?
story. I'll take a story. But yeah, Colts, unbelievable. And then I have to talk about Seattle, okay? Because not
Good. Good.
only did they take Devin Witherspoon to pick 5, which again, awesome. I'm so glad that they were willing to do this because I didn't think they would. I really didn't think they would take a corner that wasn't 6'4" and whatever else in the first round, or really in the first round at all. Period, honestly. But they took the probably, at least in my opinion, the best football player on the board at that point. They went and just did it. They're like, you know what, still need to get better on the back end, even with Tariq Woolen hitting on him. Kobe Bryant played well for them considering his draft position, but I still think he is a long-term slot player at best. So they get their other outside guy. Jackson Smith and Jigba at pick 20 as the first receiver off the board. You're able to wait to pick 20 and get him in that offense. Who are you going to guard? Like who's the guy who gets doubled? Is it just because DK because he's a freak, I guess? And then good luck trying to deal with Tyler Lockett still, however long he's going to play. And then Jackson Smith and Jigba, good luck dealing with him in the slot. What do you do against that? I don't understand.
Oh, and if you go super light, you can get run all over by the two-headed
by
running
Zach
back.
Charbonnet. Again, there's some people that criticize the Charbonnet pick.
Nope.
This team has been burned by running back injuries, right? And Kenneth Walker had some of his own last year. As much as I love Kenneth Walker, I really do. You get a guy who, if he does go down, is a starting caliber back, and then if he doesn't, you don't have to run him 20 times a game. It just makes sense because this is a team that, Geno, they hope is going to be himself, the version of himself he was this past year. If he's not quite there, run the ball 30 times. Who cares?
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
A team that runs as much as they do, running back getting drafted high is less of a problem for them. And then the fact that they also went heavy on their passing game, they're just trying to build a juggernaut offense in a weak NFC, and that's smart.
Absolutely, yeah. And then Derek Hall was fine. I think he's more of just
I love Derek Hall.
The problem with, I think for me, is and someone said this, I forget who it was, I wish I could say it, but I don't want to spend too much time on it, but he wants to hit people so badly that he doesn't actually try to get around anybody. He just goes through their face. And when it works, it's awesome. But I do wonder, he's probably going to have to pick up a couple other clubs in his bag if he wants to be a good pass rusher in the NFL. But love the power profile for him. And then just down the board, I think they took really good players down the board as well. Mike Morris is a good fit for their scheme, even though I'm not sure what his role is going to be. Bradford is a really good mauler guard. Yeah. Cameron Young's a good dart throw. Oluwatimi could be a starting center for them, honestly. I'm surprised he went this late, honestly. And after that, that's pretty much everything I have to say about their pick class. But really, really fun class for Seattle.
Yeah.
So yeah, they were on my list, but like I said, there are a ton of teams where I can make a case that I really like their draft. We're about to get into slim pickings on teams that I didn't.
So let's go through quickly. I don't want to harp on the bad picks too much or the bad draft because we don't know if they're going to be bad, but based on our own evaluation. So let's go to Tony here quick. Give me your 3 classes that weren't your favorite, at least.
So there's only one that I outright hated, and it's the Houston Texans. And I get it. You got your franchise QB, you got your franchise defensive end, you got a center, you got Tank Dell, he's gonna play football in the NFL, sure. And then just a bunch of other guys. There is nothing Will Anderson can do on an NFL football field throughout the entirety of his career that will pay off what they gave up to get him. He can become a Hall of Fame player, and this still could turn out bad because they're a roster that needs starters across the board. They don't have many guys in place that are going to be in the final phase of this football team, and most importantly, they're going to be bad this year no matter what these picks do. So to give up what is very likely to be a top 3 pick next year, just because your GM, your owner told you to take a quarterback that you didn't really want to take, and you're fine, then I have to get my guy too. That is immaturity from the GM spot. That is bad process, and that is going to really hinder what was the start of a promising rebuild. They've ripped up all of their goodwill. They are screwed. I don't know how they are going to feel next draft when number 2 overall Arizona Cardinals provided by the Houston Texans. that shit's so terrible. That's terrible process. I don't care how good these players turn out. They messed up bad. And you can try to say that they traded up for CJ Stroud and they just
It
the
doesn't work
order
that
they
way.
picked them in is determined by like making the trade up easier. Like no, because
Doesn't
you
work
had
that
one
way.
pick in the top 2 or in the top 3. You chose to trade up for the other one, and like you clearly didn't like your quarterback that much because you out of spite then traded up and got Will Anderson. Bad process, bad draft. I don't care. I don't care about the players. Bad process, bad draft. The other two I don't really have that strong opinions about. They're just I had to fill out the list. The 49ers, I just didn't really see like a cohesive draft, and I always feel this way about them. They just do weird things. Jake Moody, really good kicker, 3rd rounder. No.
It
Jair
is also
Brown.
hard when it's you start at the end of the 3rd round.
It's
Yes,
true.
although
but
I think there were other teams that like
Cleveland,
started from a bad place and like still did well, like Cleveland. Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
So I just think that I don't know, they just took weird players that I don't really see helping their team outside of the specialist, which it was too high to take a specialist. And then the Buccaneers, mainly because Kalijah Cansey is just another tweener defensive lineman they keep on taking. They got Joe Tryon-Shoyinka a couple of years ago. He plays outside, but he hasn't even really taken the step yet. They got what's his face, Logan Hall last year. Like they just keep on loading up on these tweeners that don't really have a good fit, and they're not going to move the needle. When you're a bad team, you can't be drafting guys 19th overall who at best are going to play like 40% of your defensive snaps. So I just don't. I think it was bad value for them. So those are my 3. There's really only one that I strongly dislike. And then the other 2, I was just kind of like, you could have done better.
Yeah, I'll talk about Houston because I have them for something else. But
Me too. Me too.
yeah, with everything else, like again, the Niners I also have in a different category, so I'll wait to talk about them. I think the problem with the Texans, like I said though too, is I get why you say that, and I wonder what that pick is going to turn into and why they chose to give their picks. I think the Cardinals would have taken the Cleveland pick. Honestly, I think they would have. I think that the reason why the Texans gave them that pick because they believe they're going to be better than Cleveland, and that's very dangerous for where they're at in their process.
That's a fireable offense
Exactly.
to look
It's
at those
very,
2 rosters and
it's
think they'll be
very
better.
very dangerous to do that. But we'll get into that. What's your 3 least favorite draft, Zach?
Yeah. So 2 of them are like 2 drafts I didn't like. One of them is a pick, and it kind of leads over into my kind of 3 more confusing drafts. But the 2 that I don't like, Tony, you hit it on the head with Tampa Bay. Like, look, I'm not necessarily like saying like if it was a different year that this is a bad draft, but also this is a really bad team, and I don't think that you should be this franchise in a position to be using their first pick on Kalijah Cansey.
He's a luxury pick. Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
say
If
as much as I like
this
him,
were like
he's a
2 or
luxury
3 years ago when you had Brady in his prime, oh yeah, this makes perfect sense. But now, no. Baker Mayfield starting and Kyle Trask is your backup. And I mean, I'm not saying they should have done it, but Will Levis was still on the board. That might have made a bit.
It would have been the
better-
right. Yeah, I would
would've
have
been better
given them
value.
praise for it. So
Yeah. I mean, Will Levis, even Anton Harrison.
That's who I thought was going to be the pick.
Yeah, there were just way too many other people on the board that I was just like, I don't know. Now this pick, and I don't know how you guys feel about it, but all I can tell you is what I have been hearing from around me. Yeah, Washington. Now, look, I don't have a problem with Forbes getting drafted in the 1st round, but to be the 2nd cornerback off the board before Gonzalez, it just seemed very questionable. And I think you guys might probably be like, I don't have a problem with it, but
I'll just say real quick, Zach. It's not so much that I have a problem with it. It's that I think Forbes went to one of the few teams I think he can return 1st round value on because of their scheme. They play a lot of off man. They play a lot of zone. Like I think that's what he has to do just to survive in the NFL. But again, if Christian Gonzalez was off the board and Deontay Banks was off the board, I would have been more comfortable with it, but they were not. And that's kind of where it comes down to. So that's one thing I'll say. But I think he'll play well for you guys.
Yes. I'm not saying it's not that he won't play well, but there were just a bunch of other players available still that I was like, yo, you had your pick of everybody.
That's where I think the question
Devin Witherspoon.
yeah.
And you're taking the next cornerback. I don't know if Emmanuel Forbes was the second cornerback off the board.
Right.
So I will say I think I had Forbes as my not my guy like when we did that show. He is the home run swing out of all of those corners. I think Christian Gonzalez athlete needs to learn corner. I'm not like the NFL showed us what they think about him with letting him fall. Who knows how much further he was going to fall if the Patriots hadn't stopped the slide at like 16 or 17.
Right.
But Forbes is the home run because he has like the record for most pick sixes in college football history. So like I understand in a class where like three different guys could be cornerback 2 off the board, going for the one who you think like gives you the home run splash play upside, like and like Shayne said, it fits their scheme. So good player.
Had a very draft. I wasn't and then so my third one is, and like I said, it bleeds over into my more confusing, and it is the Detroit Lions. And I don't have a problem with their draft whatsoever. I think that they actually probably hit the home run, addressing a lot of the needs that they needed on their team on day 1 and 2. But I just like taking Jahmyr Gibbs at the 12th pick, and the only thing I can think is they were like dead set on taking Bijan, and then the Falcons took him. And I know it seemed like, but like I can't think of any other way.
I think the reason Tony's shaking his head is they valued Gibbs ahead of Robinson. Apparently,
they were going to take Gibbs at 6, and then also Gibbs wasn't going to make it to 18 even, and that will tie into one of my most confusing teams.
Zach,
So like, I could have now. Granted, I don't think you could have flipped Campbell and Gibbs and people still wouldn't have looked at it as as wild, but like I don't have a problem with what they did. It's just it's not in 2023. It's a very like, man, is this 2005 again? Okay. So it's just like a very strange, very kind of like eye-popping, like this could come back to bite you in the ass, but also like okay, I see why.
Yeah, it was very much one of those like, oh, we care about adding good football players, not about value kind of drafts. And like sometimes those work out and they look really incredible, but also like the value thing exists for a reason. Like,
and the fact that Branch was the last of the day, the round day one around 1 and 2 picks is even crazier to me.
Yeah. So I'll talk about the Lions more when I get to my confusing teams because they're going to be one. So for my least favorite drafts, again, this class, I mean, this draft class in general, I think a lot of teams did really well. So I'm not going to say that I don't think any of these classes are going to work out, but some I just don't agree with kind of where they went value-wise. So I'll start with the Jaguars. I really like Anton Harrison as the first pick, but after that, it gets ugly. Brenton Strange as pick 61. 5th round pick for me, probably 5th, 6th. Not a bad football player, but you do not need to take him at pick 61. I do not understand that one bit, frankly. Tank Bigsby in 3rd round. I'll pass. I don't need to do that. I'm not a big fan of his generally, so like that's part of it. But I just don't really get that. I mean, he's probably going to play a role because they drafted him high for a reason, but I just don't see the value there. Ventrell Miller, I actually don't hate too much. I think he was a pretty good player at Florida, but he's an older player. He's kind of just like he'd be a guy that I would love to have a chance to play a little bit because he's older and he's experienced, but they don't need a linebacker. So I don't really know what really the point of drafting one that high is. Tyler Lacey, didn't really watch a lot of him, so I can't say too much. Shashir Abdullah I really like is like a hybrid back. I think he'd be what Caleb Von Chason was supposed to be. So like good, I guess. I don't know. But good for them. Antonio Johnson in the 5th round is fine. I think he's hopefully going to play free safety for them long term. I think that's his best role, so maybe he does something there. Parker Washington is a really good pick, but again, I just don't like none of these players to me outside of Anton Harrison, mostly because of his suspension for Cam Robinson. I don't see any of these guys providing much value for the first like 2 years of their contract. So like in a team that's trying to strike while it's hot in the AFC South, I don't think this draft class does a whole lot of anything to make you a better football team next year. So it could lead to some problems where like they have a little window here to try to get some momentum. And I think it might have been stopped by this class a little bit, but we'll see. Another class, Cowboys. So I get the Mozzie Smith pick. Like it was mocked a lot. It's not no surprise. It just wasn't as high. And I do not have him as a first round pick. So like, but the value I guess isn't too bad considering they need the position. Luke Schoonmaker pick again. What's with the Big Ten tight ends being like drafted by like 2 or 3 rounds earlier than they need to be? Like,
Well, I mean, the entire tight end run happened on
did.
day 2, right?
Yeah.
So,
So like
like,
I
I
get
think
that, but
teams
like
saw it start and just got desperate.
Like if you wanted to take a tight end in the top 60, they should have just taken Michael Mayer 26 because Shoemaker is not better than the tight ends they have on the roster. He's not. He will if he plays over them. I would be shocked if he beats out Jake Ferguson or even Peyton. Like I just don't think he'll play beat them out. DeMarvin Overshown just overdrafted as a linebacker. I
Yeah.
think he's got a lot of traits, but again,
I don't even think he's a linebacker.
like again, is he going to play like the curse role? Maybe like fine, but like
That's where it would be.
but if that's what I mean, I just don't know if that value is there. Like Fehoko Jr., he's actually really productive pass rusher. He's kind of a weird pass rusher, but I think he'll be fine. And the rest of the class, Deuce Vaughn is the only other pick I really liked, just because it's Deuce Vaughn. I love him,
And not to mention, like, it was the moment of the draft getting to see his dad call him. It was so
I'm
cool.
coming home. Literally, it's crazy.
I'm a sucker for a wholesome moment like that.
Yeah, I love that.
Me.
But he's a good player too. I really do. So like that's good for them. They have a change of pace guy. But I just don't think there's a lot of impact personally. And then the last one I had for least favorite, weirdly enough, like I didn't even want to put them here because they didn't have a lot to work with because they traded down and did a bunch of stuff. But I don't know if I like the Vikings. What they did, like, because ultimately, like, you get Jordan Addison, and I think he's going to be a good fit with Justin Jefferson. But I did have Addison as a mid-second round pick. Personally, I did. That's just kind of where I landed on him. So it is a little early. You had Deontay Banks on the board. You had even Joey Porter on the board with the new defensive coordinator coming in. Guess what? Runs press man. We know about it. You know, Zach. He's going to want to run press man coverage. They get Mekhi Blackman, who I think actually, ironically, will probably be their corner one by midseason, just by default almost. But like he's a third round, late third round pick. Like you don't want to invest at a position that's your weakest this late in the class that has so many good corners in it. I just think you would have been able to find a mid round receiver that could have helped you out this year later on and taken one of Banks or Porter Jr. there. I don't really hate any of the other picks they really had, honestly. Like I love Dwayne McBride. You know, I love Dwayne McBride. Granted, injury, maybe issues with him possibly, so that's part of it. Like that pick, but I don't think they did a whole lot to help them next year. Like Addison will help with the offense, but that defense, man, is just going to be tough, honestly. So,
yeah.
So, but
yeah, I'm going to talk about the Jags in my next segment, so I don't want to.
Yeah,
go. I will say for Minnesota, like I loved the Addison pick, and then the rest they didn't have picks.
They didn't
really.
have many.
So like I think they got starters out of their first 2 picks, and then like the rest are throwaways.
Yeah,
they're in my confusing category.
Yeah,
they got Jaron Hall, right?
They did.
Yeah,
I like that. That's an improvement over when they got Kellen Mond in like the second round.
This is fair.
All right, so I guess if we want to kick off the confusing, because then I'll kick off with them.
Yeah, let's go.
They're confusing me because like, okay, Jordan Addison, that's cool. I guess they really are locked in long term to this idea that Kirk Cousins is the man to take them. And I was expecting some sort of pick of a quarterback much higher than the 5th round. I don't know. I just don't understand what they're doing with their future at the moment. Because like even like you said, Shayne, like they got Mekhi Blackman in the 3rd round and everything, but like, yeah, they don't have picks. But like, I don't see them really addressing or doing anything to change what their trajectory is as a team. And I'm just like, all right, so are y'all just chilling? Like y'all are cool with going to the 2nd round of the playoffs and losing? I mean, that's all right, fine, cool. Y'all do you. But they're like, I just don't understand what Minnesota's like direction is at the moment. Cause I like, again, Kirk Cousins has shown you exactly as far as he can take you. There's nothing more that can happen.
I didn't even remember to mention it, Zach, but the Will Levis thing would have made a lot of sense because he already knows the offense. He does.
Yeah.
Like he would have been able to come in and like maybe not year one, obviously, because Cousins is still there, but would have made sense and the value would have been there at 23. I would have understood it, but
yeah.
I actually don't mind their plan at quarterback at least. I was the biggest proponent of Will Levis to the Vikings. I wanted that to happen. I wanted to see it. But ultimately, if they looked at Levis and Hooker as like guys that weren't going to give them anything more than what they currently have, which I mean, it's a fair assessment of those guys. It's not where I would have seen Levis at least, but then spending one of your first two picks on them is kind of wasted value. Like it makes sense to me that if you don't think your quarterback of the future is here and you don't have like
And
a
that's fine.
trade down opportunity or
That's
something,
why I didn't really care that much about
take
it.
premium positions, and they did that. And so like I'm willing to give them a little bit of a leash on like swinging for quarterback isn't necessarily taking a guy who ultimately went in the second round.
Right.
Like I think their trade up opportunity wasn't there, and maybe they just kind of are like, well, maybe next year something better will come along.
I totally think that if Hooker was available in round 3, they probably would have taken him. But that goes into my second team with Detroit. And like I said earlier, I love Detroit's class. Getting Hooker in round 3 with pick 5, I think is perfect for what they are doing as a team. But like I said, the first 2 rounds, I'm not mad at the picks. I'm just like, all right, cool. We don't see this every day, and y'all had them, and we mentioned Seattle earlier. To have 4 picks in the first 2 rounds is insane. And both Seattle and Detroit, whether you want to give Detroit credit or not, they hit team needs across almost all 4-day round 1 and round 2 picks. So like, yes, it's a very confusing draft because it's not something we're used to seeing, but I'm not mad at it. And I think Hooker was also a fantastic selection to grab him because God forbid if you let him get set up, it's the perfect situation for him because he will sit this year, and they have somebody who they're not like Goff is going to start this year. There's no reason for Goff not to start. And if something happens and you can thrust Hooker in there a bit sooner, then we're good. But he gets the chance to sit now, and I think that's perfect for him. And then the only other confusing one I have was Houston because I have the compensation right here. It is
first round pick next year, third round pick next year,
yep,
and
the 2024 third. Yep. So like, look, I personally I think there's only one player at that time that would have justified doing that, and that was Jalen Carter. Because
still wouldn't have justified.
But all I'm saying that I'm literally talking the best person in the draft, and you traded practically 3 first round picks because let's be honest, 33 was the first pick of the second round for all intents and purposes. That's a lot, and I know DeMeco Ryans is a fantastic defensive coach and all this stuff, but man, is Will McDonald really that? Is really worth all of that? I don't mind the rest of their picks. I like the CJ Stroud pick. I think that they did a fantastic job of baiting the draft hype beforehand and being like, oh yeah, there's no way this is gonna happen. Like, why would we take CJ Stroud? His S2 scores, blah, blah, blah. And then did that. But that, like Tony said, they kind of all the hype that was in the offseason kind of got vamped in a moment's notice because it was like, oh wait, y'all traded up to 3. Oh wait, why did you trade up to 3 for that?
Yeah, and I'm not going to harp on it anymore. But so real quick here, so I'll do my confusing ones and I'll let Tony finish us off here. Lines, I'll just say my problem with it is I keep hearing Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be gone at 18, and that's, in my opinion, that's okay. Just don't take him then. Like, that's where I'm at with it. It's just, again, he's running back. I understand that he's a really good player. I'm not taking running back in the top 12 of the draft if he's not Bijan Robinson. Just not going to happen. Jack Campbell, really good player. He's not 18th pick in the draft anymore. You can't do it. You can't. Sam Laporta, I really like. Maybe a little bit early, but again, they addressed that end, which I was wondering if they would. Fine. Brent Branch, awesome. Hendon Hooker, I think, was not a good pick, not because he was not a good value, but I fear that if Jared Goff gets hurt and Hooker plays well, they might think that he could be the future, and he's not. They need they should have been the team to move to 3 and get into it. They should have jumped to do that. I understand Cardinals didn't give them the opportunity because the Texans gave them way more than they could have given them realistically. But that was the right move if you're going to take a quarterback in the class. It was really the only move, in my opinion. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. The rest of the picks, whatever. Again, I just don't understand the thought process. Like, I think all the players are good, so like they're going to be a better football team because of them. But I don't think it was the right allocation of resources. Texans, we kind of hit on it a bunch. They just gave up too much for what they're trying to do. Like, you should have just taken Will Anderson and taken a quarterback next year. That's what you should have done. If you didn't believe in C.J. Stroud enough to make him the first round pick, like the big one, just don't take him. Take Will Anderson Jr. I understand that the owner apparently probably had something to do with that, but that's okay. Just take one of the two of them and wait to pick 12. You can get another pass rusher that, granted, not as good as Will Anderson, but still not worth giving up a
first rounds.
Cardinals could be picking 1 and 2 next year, guys. That's kind of what's
Caleb Williams, Marvin Harrison Jr. You are Arizona Cardinals.
Yeah, well,
oh my gosh.
we'll get into that possibility later. But then for me, the 49ers. Again, I have no clue what their thought process was. Jair Brown is a purely run defending safety. Interesting. Jake Moody, really good kicker, not a third round pick. Cameron Latsue probably didn't need to get drafted, in my opinion, honestly. So that's interesting there. Took a better tight end probably later on, honestly, from Oklahoma. Like, just don't have anything to say about them other than, like, this is what the Niners do, and they'll probably still be good, but I would be surprised if any of these players return value other than the kicker, ironically.
I do think Darrell Luter will return value, but I didn't.
Yeah.
I didn't bring him up when I was roasting the rest of their draft because I was like, yeah, good player, but he's mixed in there with a bunch of other bad picks.
So it doesn't. Yeah, it's fine. But yeah, I just don't understand anything. At least they didn't take a running back in the third round. At least there's that.
The first time in like 5 years that they haven't traded up for a third round running back that they ultimately cut.
I think, right? Didn't he joke about it?
I wouldn't be surprised.
I think on a draft call with like either Latu or Jair Brown, he's like, yeah, I was surprised it wasn't a running back, but whatever. Anyway, I don't know if that's true or not, but Tony, lead us off here with your confusing drafts here.
Yeah, so continue the theme. We're all confused by the Lions. I will say, I'm confused for, I guess, different reasons, but slightly
they're going to be good players, man, but I just don't know about the process, that's all.
So I'm not even as concerned about the process of, like, I think Gibbs picked at 12 based off of what we've heard. If you want Gibbs, you pick him at 12. And I think if you're going to make that pick, you have to trade back to recoup some value while you're doing it, and they accomplished that. They traded back, they picked up the value, and then they kind of made it a wash with the value spent on Gibbs. Don't mind that. Jack Campbell, both of these guys, they were top really 20 to 25 players on people's boards. I'm not going to hound them for taking Jack Campbell 18th really overall, because if he's top 20, like, sure, why not? Not a valuable position, but he's a good football player. Sam Laporta, good football player. Weird to take him over Michael Mayer, though.
A little bit, but I get it kind of because, again, you know my opinion on Mayer. Like, I don't think he's a difference maker in the NFL personally, so, like, whatever, but...
well, it's not like Laporta is either.
He has more vertical.
His run after catch ability.
Iowa tight end.
Yeah, exactly.
Brian Branch, I love the pick. Hendon Hooker, Broderick Martin. You traded up a lot to go get him, and you could have had him 100 picks later.
Yeah, that one was weird, wasn't it?
Yeah, super weird move to do that. I think they had to give up a future pick to get it done too.
It was weird, but whatever.
My main point of confusion from this Lions draft, because I do think they took good players at positions of need. They made their football team better. They're going to win their division. When the hell are they going to enter the contender phase? Because right now they're in the, hey, we're the exciting young rebuild. We're doing things the right way. We're getting our foot in the door. We had a chance at the playoffs. We're building something special here. But in order to get from that, hey, they're going to make the playoffs and be fun, to contending, we have to kick the door in and make something big happen. Instead, they just reinvested into building their current philosophy stronger, which puts you on a path to, at best, be a woeful late playoff exit. Like,
this team could become the Vikings very fast. Yes.
Or like the Goff era Rams for instance.
Yeah.
Because
At
all of
least
these
they made it
teams,
Super Bowl, but still, yeah.
because they have
And scored
good
3 points.
I
That's the
know,
pace they're
but
on right
you
now.
get my point. Like, at least
they have they have mediocre to good quarterback play, and they don't want to get rid of it because they're like, well, what if we don't find it again? But it's like, well, yeah, but you're never going to do anything better than what you're doing right now.
You're not going to be
Still.
bad.
Yeah, what they should have done is paid whatever price Arizona wanted for third overall and taken Anthony Richardson.
100%.
Because otherwise, I thought they handled their draft well outside of not doing that. Despite handling their draft well, I think that they have dug themselves a grave for this iteration of the team when it could have been the foundation for a Super Bowl roster. So, that's what I'm confused by. I'm confused by the passing up of the opportunity, the ballarding of this roster. So, in 5 years, they're going to take the most athletic quarterback in the draft. I guess that's what you have to look forward to, Detroit.
I guess my question would be, though, if they traded with Arizona for something of equal or greater value, if they took Anthony Richardson, does that make it worth it?
Yes.
Yeah, because here's my thing with it, and I'll touch on this too, Tony, is Jared Goff right now is playing well enough where you're not going to pick any lower than probably the mid-teens, right?
Yeah.
Next year's quarterback class is supposed to be great, obviously, but the guys who are probably worth being drafted ahead to start over Goff in the future are going to be gone in the first 3 picks, probably, realistically, right? So, if you are going to go and get a quarterback, you're going to have to hemorrhage way more assets than you would have had to this year. And you have the assets to hemorrhage this year. You could have even justified given 18 and 6 and said, you know what, we have 2 first-round picks. Let's make it 1 and go get our quarterback. Like, you could justify that. You could give up a first next year because you think you're going to be a good football team, and they should be a good football team. Whatever the case may be, you get a guy that has the upside who can supersede what Goff has done in the NFL, and you don't have to play him for at least a year, maybe 2, realistically. Like, you don't have to. And you have an offensive coordinator who, maybe he might be gone by the time that Richardson would be starting because he's already gotten head coaching opportunities, but he would be one who you feel confident can build a run game with him, make him valuable early on too, maybe do some packages. Like, their value was there, and I just don't think they're going to have the opportunity to draft a quarterback high again because of how good they've done with the roster.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. I don't know if there would have been many teams that could really have pulled the trigger besides Houston, because Houston already got
with what Houston gave. That's the problem. Houston gave up something that the Cardinals could not turn down.
Well,
right?
I also think that a lot of other teams wouldn't be able to do because there's just too much uncertainty around. Like we just said, that's a lot. And it would be Anthony Richardson, it would be a quarterback, but again, we're not talking about Anthony Richardson like he's going to start day 1. And yes, that's what the Lions were looking for, but if that fails, then it's going to turn back on them. And it's a lot easier. It would be a lot easier for Houston to send all that stuff and be like, oh yeah, well, we already got Stroud. Like, we got the defensive coach.
Yeah. I just think if the Lions hit on all of these picks, there's still a very decent chance that this coaching staff and this GM gets fired before they ever reach contender status.
That's the problem.
If they had traded up for Anthony Richardson, they at least had a chance at being a contender.
Yeah, they could say, hey, I got
they took their probability of being
great.
a contender from 0 to 0. Despite getting significantly better, that's what they did, and that's what I'm confused by. Really quick, running through the next 2 because they're not as confusing. The Jaguars, they've already been mentioned. They are a young contender. They had room. They could have added. They had a ton of picks. They could have condensed and added guys who are really going to impact the roster. Instead, they traded back. They made 13 picks. Guess how many of those were their original selections?
I think
none.
2.
2. It was 2. They made 2 of their original selections. The rest were all acquired via trade. They did add Calvin Ridley technically with this class, which is exciting, but everything else, they took the approach I thought the Texans should have done, which is just trade back and just bring in guys who will make the roster. You shouldn't be doing that when you're the Jaguars. You should be swinging big, and they just disconnect of where they are and where they should be. And then the last one is just the Jets. And this is a combination
I feel bad
of
for the Jets personally. My bad.
But I don't feel bad for them. So this is a combination of what they did and then what they were rumored to want to do.
Yeah.
And so that's where the confusion comes from. They got jumped by the Steelers, who picked Broderick Jones.
Yes.
We found out after the fact Will McDonald was the pick. He was the pick even if Broderick Jones was on the board, which is absurd. absurd to think about. Like, Will McDonald was a guy people were projecting to go 31st overall. Like, taking him 15th with the confidence that you would take him over a franchise tackle when that is clearly your biggest need, that I don't know. That doesn't sit well with me. Joe Tippmann, I like, but you did just extend Connor McGovern, so like, what's going?
GMS better player, so in my opinion,
Debatable.
in my opinion.
In many people's opinions, but also like debatable.
Yeah.
Carter Warren, yeah, you finally invested in tackle. Another guy who can't stay on the field. Great job, guys.
Yeah, it's tough. Good player,
Israel
but,
Abanikanda. I actually don't hate this pick too much, but just confusion with the Jets in general.
Yeah.
They built so much of the roster. They invested so many of the picks and the assets into the LaFleur offense. Breece Hall is no longer like a great scheme fit for this team. Just a year into it, we heard they were targeting Jahmyr Gibbs at 15th overall. This is why Gibbs wouldn't have been on the board at 18, because the New York Jets were sitting here ready to take him after taking Breece Hall last year. It doesn't make any sense. So just there's a lot of things they did that I'm like, what is your perception of your own roster right now? What do you think you guys are doing? And also, this scheme shift might be a big deal because a lot of your offense was built around and predicated on the idea of the LaFleur offense that is no longer there. So I don't know. There's something wonky going on in New York, and I don't quite trust
honestly,
their build
what
right now.
what I think happened, not actually, but I just want to say this because I think it's funny. They spent too much time trying to figure out Aaron Rodgers trade. They forgot to scout. You know, like they just
No, straight up, that's a dedication of resources that they had to have.
They went into a darkness retreat with Aaron Rodgers. They came out, they're like, oh no, the draft is tomorrow.
Oh crap! we got Aaron, so like I don't know, what should we do? Well, we could use a pass rusher, right? It's like we drafted one last year. Oh no, we need this guy. We'll take him. I like Will McDonald, by the way, but 15.
I like him too, but
also like he is different from everything they have at edge, I guess, because he's more of just a pure like flamethrower off the edge, hopefully. But man, I can't really disagree with you, Tony.
True little tidbit very quickly in the same vein that you were saying about Jacksonville, Tony. The only pick that Houston made that they own this year was the first pick. Every single one was traded.
Oh wow, and I didn't know that. That's cool.
Denver did not make a single selection that they owned originally. All 5 of their picks were traded.
Denver, sneaky good draft, by the way. Don't have the time to get into it, but sneaky good draft.
They did well. Yeah, but yeah, we're gonna cut it loose for this episode here, guys. We're gonna be back next week, hopefully, talk more about the draft, some more things we're gonna talk about with that. We'll focus on that for a while till OTAs and everything start.
UDFAs, baby.
Yeah, we could definitely talk about some classes for that too. But
some Puna Ford.
Puna Ford, yeah, dude, that's
go Bills.
Yeah, nice job with that. But all right, we'll see you guys next week. Thank you for joining us, and we'll talk more draft next episode.